Hey, so this is the brand new Oppo Find X7 Ultra. Now, this phone was just announced earlier this month and I've actually had it for about 3 weeks now. Technically, I am on vacation in the Philippines, but I've been shooting with this phone a ton and I think it's time to tell you guys all about it. So let's start off with its specs real quick. The Oppo Find X7 Ultra is using Qualcomm's latest chip, which is the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. This also comes equipped with 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage. In terms of its display, the X7 Ultra is equipped with a 6.82-inch, 120Hz, 1440p AMOLED display that offers up to 1600 nits in direct sunlight and can get as bright as 4500 nits peak when viewing HDR content, which is absolutely nuts and in my opinion is unnecessary at this point, but hey, I guess that's a cool feature to have. The star of the show though is around the back, and it's the quad camera system that Oppo equipped this phone with. We have 4 50 megapixel cameras on here, and yes, the camera module is massive, but trust me when I say this, the camera system does not disappoint, and we'll talk more about that later in the video. Now, just to touch up on design really quickly again, I just wanted to give you guys a glimpse of, what the Find X6 Pro from last year looks like next to this X7 Ultra. Now, both looks pretty similar, but I'm really digging this silver camera module versus the black glass on the X6 Pro. But also what's new here is that they moved the volume buttons from the left side of the phone to the right side, which to be quite honest, I'm not a fan of. I've always preferred to have the volume buttons on the opposite side of the power button since it's easier to take screenshots using one hand, but they did add an alert slider, which we've only really seen on OnePlus phones. And while this looks and feels like the one on OnePlus devices, when you put the slider all the way at the top position, it enters what Oppo's calling VIP mode. Now, this will basically disable cameras, location access, microphones, and put your phone in silent mode, which I thought was pretty cool and something we don't typically see in a lot of flagship phones. Besides that, underneath this vegan leather back houses a 5000 milliamp hour battery, which is pretty standard in today's flagship realm of smartphones. It supports up to 100 watts of SuperVOOC wired charging and up to 50 watts wirelessly. Now, in my testing, the month that I've had the phone, it's been a toss-up of, all day battery, meaning I'll have about 20 to 30% the next day, to having to recharge my phone by 11 p.m. Now, I personally have no issues with battery life on this phone since it charges so fast. So if you care about battery life, it's not really a concern here. Now, when it comes to performance though, this is actually the first device that I've used with the newest Snapdragon processor, the 8 Gen 3, and man, it is a beast. Not only is it perfect for almost any situation, whether it be for gaming or multitasking and providing a super fast and snappy experience, the efficiency, like I said earlier, is top notch. Now, when I was playing Genshin Impact, which is a pretty demanding game, I can easily get 60 frames per second really easily, but I wouldn't say that you can get consistent 60 frames per second for more than 45 minutes without the phone getting really warm and, throttle the chip a little bit and dip down closer to 30 to 40 frames per second. But I have been playing on medium to low settings, and I doubt that this phone can do 60 frames per second on that high settings. But for Genshin Impact to run in those conditions for that long and without the phone becoming extremely laggy, I'm super impressed with, what I've been able to experience. Now, I couldn't really tell a massive difference between an 8 Gen 2 device and an 8 Gen 3 device on a daily basis, but apparently the difference in performance is about 30% faster on the new chip and about 20% better power efficiency. So with all of that being said, I think from an iterative update standpoint, the X7 Ultra and X6 Pro from last year isn't that much different when it comes to day-to-day operation, but in the long run, with more updates and new features bound to come out, the X7 Ultra will most likely get it first or have some features exclusive to this phone because of that new chip. All right, now let's talk about the cameras. Now, this is probably the section that you've all been waiting for, and I get it. This is actually, where we'll see most of the bigger changes, especially from last year's flagship. So like I said earlier in the video, the Oppo Find X7 Ultra comes equipped with a quad camera setup, All 4 cameras are 50 megapixels. The main camera is equipped with the newest sensor from Sony, and it's called the Light 900. It's a 1-inch sensor specifically designed for smartphones, so I guess all previous 1-inch sensors weren't really designed for smartphones whatsoever. But yeah, this new sensor is supposed to be 32% more efficient, so if you're always taking photos, this shouldn't affect battery life too much. And then we have the ultra-wide camera, which again has a 50 megapixel sensor and an f2.0 aperture. And this has a sensor size of 1/1.95 inches, which is pretty massive for an ultra-wide camera. And then we have the 2 periscope zoom lenses, one at 3x, which is using the same IMX890 sensor with an f2.6 aperture from last year's X6 Pro. But what's new here is in the zoom range, which is a 6x periscope zoom lens, also at 50 megapixels. And this one's using the IMX858 sensor with an f4.3 aperture. And this one can utilize Oppo's AI zoom, which uses AI with the help of that Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 to help improve clarity at 20x or even 30x zoom shots. And I'll have some sample shots later in the video. Now I'm going to talk about each camera as its own thing and try not to cross-reference other focal lengths on this phone. So let's talk about the ultra-wide first. I think the ultra-wide camera on the X7 Ultra is one of the nicest that I've used hands down. I think the updated sensor, the much bigger sensor with a faster aperture, really helps makes the shot look like it's not shot on a smartphone. When you get close to your subject using the ultra-wide, you get this nice out of focus bokeh in the background, which is something I've never really seen before on a smartphone. Overall, I'm pretty impressed with what I've been able to capture on the ultra-wide. Like I keep saying, it's hands down the best ultra-wide camera that I've used. Shots are really sharp, the colors look amazing, and plus you get that nice bokeh. Moving on to the main wide camera, the one using the new 1-inch Sony Light 900 sensor. Now, if you're familiar with a 1-inch sensor on a smartphone, you know that you can get some really incredible looking bokeh with that 1-inch camera. Autofocus is super fast on here, and the fact that you can get close to your subject and get even more background blur is really sweet. I think the shots that I'm able to capture with this main lens looks great. The colors do look a little bit more artsy, if that makes any sense. It's not totally flat or as neutral looking as what you get from a Pixel phone or an iPhone, but it has this nice characteristic to it that's unique to Oppo and this phone. The midtones look rich, and the balance between the highlights and the shadows looks really good too. Overall, this main camera is definitely my second favorite focal length to shoot with, and my favorite would still have to be this 3x periscope zoom lens. As someone who enjoys shooting with a longer focal length, the 65mm focal length of this 3x is the perfect zoom range for anyone looking to shoot portraits or even product photography. Now, the reason why the 3x zoom lens is my favorite lens to shoot with is because of that 25cm minimum focusing distance. It allows me to shoot almost macro-like shots using the 3x lens. Plus, with that larger sensor and f2.6 aperture, you kind of get this natural portrait bokeh in all your shots, which I love. Plus, that compression that a longer focal length gives you looks so good. Now, the next one is the 6x periscope zoom lens, which, to be completely honest, I didn't really use all that much just because I didn't need a 6x zoom lens or 135mm focal length in all my shots. But what you can get out of this lens looks really good too. It has a pretty compressed look thanks to that longer focal length, and the colors or overall characteristic looks just about the same as the 3 other lenses. More often than not though, I'm using the 1x or 3x zoom lens, but the nice thing about this lens is that AI zoom that Oppo's touting. At 20x or even 30x from the viewfinder, it might look like you're shooting a straight potato, but trust me, once you shoot it and once you tap on that shutter button and you let it process, it'll make your photo look crisp and clear. And while it's not as clear as a native 6x zoom lens or 3x zoom lens, for a digital zoom, especially at that 20x range, it's pretty impressive. And of course, you can still choose to shoot using all 4 lenses to shoot in that high-res 50 megapixel mode if you want, but I do wish that Oppo or other OEMs start to give us an option to shoot in 24 megapixel photos instead of that 12 megapixel shot that we've been used to. As of now, there's no other phone that I've used that has this feature besides the new iPhone 15 series, and I'd love to get 24 megapixel photos moving forward because it does make a difference, especially if you want to crop and pose and if you want your photos to look slightly better on social. But yeah, besides its superb photo quality, not much has changed on the video front. I did notice that all lenses, including the front-facing camera, does support 60 frames per second at 4K, so that's really nice to see. I remember the Find X6 Pro when that first launched, the front-facing camera was capped at 1080p 60, so it's really nice to see 4K 60 on all the cameras on here. And yeah, that's the Oppo Find X7 Ultra. Under the hood, in terms of day-to-day operation, not much has really changed here in all honesty. It's a little bit more efficient and a little bit more powerful than last year's X6 Pro, but the cameras did change quite a bit, especially when it comes to its processing. Plus, with the addition of that 6x periscope zoom lens, you now have this complete range of zooms from 0.6x ultra wide to 6x optically, and a very, very usable 20x or 30x AI zoom. Now, I will be checking out the new Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra very, very soon, so if you're curious on how those cameras stack up to this, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and yeah, I'll see you all in the next one.